You know, I did reflect, and we did reflect as a leadership team about, you know, are we talking to staff enough about our values? Is this becoming too systematic? Is it, you know, too much? You know, how are we going to move these students from an A to an A star or whatever? Are we talking enough about values? And it's interesting because my team was giving me feedback about, we need you to talk about the local area more, or you know, remind people. And so that's been a learning point for me over the last couple of years.
Joining me on the conversation today is Jan Balon, who is the head of the London Academy of Excellence in Tottenham, in North London. And Jan and I have one thing in common, in that we're both in different ways connected with Highgate School. One, because I went there, and two, because Highgate supports some of the activities that Jan and his colleagues are managing to do at the Academy. So it's great to meet you, Jan. I know we had a chat the other day about it, but I'm going to leave you to tell us a little bit about the Academy, and when it was set up, what it tries to achieve, and where you are. So tell us something about it, because it sounds fascinating.
I hope so. So we're a 16 to 19 free school set up under the free school programme, which has been around in the UK for the last 10 years or so. And we teach our students, who the majority of whom come from the local community, a community which is disadvantaged and has had kind of a checkered historical history, historical context, I guess. And we use the support of Highgate as a principal education sponsor, one of the leading independent schools in the country, and Tottenham Hotspur, Premier League Football Club, to provide a kind of aspirational academic sixth form experience for those students. Typically, these students would have either had to leave the area for this kind of experience, or perhaps sort of tone down, I guess, their aspiration in some way, because you know, there's been a long-standing issue with leading universities and Russell Group universities and our kind of demographic of students not reaching those destinations. So the idea is to give these local students in Tottenham the same experiences that maybe their peers at an independent school would get, and show that essentially they can reach the same destinations.
Great. And apart from academic achievement, what other things are you focused on?
So what we know, and I before my role here, I worked in Tottenham for a number of years, so I know the local area, the local landscape very well, is although the academic success makes a huge difference, actually it's what schools can do to try and give students experiences which take them out of their comfort zone within the kind of safe environment of the school, which is going to help them longer term. So we know, you know, there's studies which support this, and it's also clear anecdotally. When our students start with us in year 12 and you compare them with the students at, for example, Highgate, although academically they may not be dissimilar, there certainly is a difference for many of them in the way that their confidence levels, their ability to talk to groups of people, and really their confidence in themselves. So a big part of our programme focuses on trying to, in a safe and a kind of comfortable way, get kids out of their comfort zone, and try and push them to have those kind of experiences. So when they do land up at a leading university or in an interview further down the line, they're used to different kind of experiences which they can take the learning from.
Understood. And you know, you are in this very, well, poor, deprived part of North London. And so raising the level of opportunity must be something that's absolutely critical to you and to the staff that you work with and to the school. And is it just focused on sort of academic attainment, or do some of your students leave but then go on to do other things which may not involve university, but involve having to sort of use some of the studying and some of the sort of social development work that you've done in those careers or in those roles that they take up? And what are sort of things that some of the students will do if they don't go to university?
So currently we've had one, we opened in 2017, so we've had one cohort that's gone through, and our second cohort now is finishing and going to receive their A-level grades. The vast majority of those students at present have gone on to university, and they've gone on to Russell Group universities. I think if you went back to 2016-17, just before we opened, 1% of Tottenham school leavers went to a Russell Group university. In our first cohort, it was 56. This year, 84% have offers. Yeah. So that is the kind of premier destination. That's what a lot of our students are aiming for, and we support resource to try and get them there. However, there is a question mark for us as an institution about how sustainable or how long-term that model of kind of education is in the UK, because obviously a lot of leading universities have begun to bring in degree apprenticeships. A lot of companies have really good quality degree apprenticeships which are equally competitive. Yeah. So it's a challenge for us actually within the model that we operate to make sure that we're abreast of those kind of developments as well, because we do have a small number at the moment, but a number of students who have gone on to some of those in business.
And I mentioned earlier, and sort of expand on it a little bit, that you're in the middle of you're actually based in a shopping centre, I think, in the middle in Tottenham, or certainly it looks like you are. And you've got this Premier Football Club supporting you in many ways. You've got a leading independent school supporting you. You've got lots of work you have to do in the local community. You've got your staff to support, the students to support. This must give you quite a lot of sort of leadership issues that you sort of fill your day with. I'd be interested to know what some of those are, or some of the sort of challenges that you personally face in leading what is really quite an exceptional situation.
Yeah, so our location, just to touch on that for a moment, is an interesting one. We're above a Sainsbury's supermarket, but we can literally physically connected to the incredible Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So it's a really, and anyone who knows the area, sort of that stadium really physically and economically dominates this local area. So kind of our association with it is clearly really helpful in lots of ways, and it gives us a fantastic resource. But actually, importantly for us as an organisation, is the fact that we don't want to appear in any way remote from our local community. This school is not designed to be a kind of elite academic institution tagged onto with a fantastic building, tagged onto an incredible stadium, which for the local year 11 or year 10 student or family walking down the street, it just feels unattainable. Right. So a big part of our ethos is to say, look, we exist for this local community. We will do everything we can to try and ensure that as many students as possible from this local community are able to take up the offer that we believe is a fantastic one and will benefit them hugely. So at the moment, we're talking to a number of people about trying to fund more support for students in local schools before they come to us, to try and support them to improve their grades in order to be able to come here and then go on, we think then, to the destinations that we can help them to get to. So I think it helps, in terms of going to the question about leadership, I think it helps having a very, very clearly defined ethos. And I think we could be perceived as a sort of elite institution which is trying to pull in just essentially the highest performing kids from anywhere vaguely close to here and get them to great destinations and shout about that. Actually, that's very much not the ethos that the governors have, that any of the sponsors or the partner schools have. Everybody is completely united in believing that what we do is for primarily disadvantaged. And actually that is the glue that holds all of the organisations who are involved together. So for me, it's coming back to that with everything we do. So for example, one of the things we put into place straight away when we opened and has continued for the last 3 years has been a really coherent community projects programme. So if you're in year 12 here, every week you'll be taking part in one of 32 community projects, and that can range from going back to your primary school, secondary school, hospice, hospital, food bank, youth club. And the message that we consistently give to students is, whether you are from Tottenham or you travel to this area for your education, you should be giving something back to this community, because this community we can't collect a group of high performing, motivated, aspirational students and then kind of box them off in this building, import them in and send them back home at the end of the day. We have to do what we can for the local community. And my aim is that these students, come back. We're appointing teaching staff from some of these students, that some of these students come back to this area or stay in this area and, start businesses, etc. Because a school, an institution with the number and range of supporters that we have in an area like this cannot just define itself by the grades that 250 students get. That's not enough.
Yeah. It's interesting for me because a lot of the work that I get involved with, if I'm involved with executives and global organisations and things, is trying to get them to be clear about the direction in which they're wanting the organisation to go. And I don't just mean sort of short-term goals and stuff like that, but being quite clear about what is their purpose and what are they trying to achieve. And sometimes that's quite clear, and sometimes it isn't. And the way you've just spoken about, you know, the direction, that the reason for the academy to exist and what you're trying to achieve, just indicates that it's not only is it clear to you, but it's obviously clear to all the partner organisations, the governors, the parents, the local community, as well as to, and everyone sort of focused in the same direction on that. One of the struggles we sometimes find is actually getting people to align to that, so understanding how their bit plays a part in what you're trying to achieve. The bit that often isn't difficult is the commitment piece, the sort of, yeah, we're in for this, we can see a bit, it's having an impact. You know, we want to teach at the academy, we want to come to the academy as a student, as parents, we want to engage with it, outside organisations. So in terms of the alignment piece, are there any sort of things that you have to work at there? Because you've been quite clear about what the purpose is of the academy.
So I think I found it, so I'd come, as I said, I'd worked in the local area for a number of years, and came 6 months before the school opened. So I had the real privilege of kind of shaping that vision along with the partner organisations and the sponsor organisations who had set that out in a kind of broad sense, and then appointing people to that. So I think that's a hugely fortunate situation to be in. You know, normally when you take over an organisation, you have an existing staff body, you have in a school you'll have existing students, etc. And I always look at people who are sort of turning organisations around and think that's a really interesting challenge, but a very different one from the one that I had or we had here. Now, I think one of my own reflections over the last few years is it's very easy once you get beyond that kind of we're new and shiny and we keep talking about what we're about. Maybe a year, 18 months down the line, it's easy to stop giving those messages which which I certainly was so kind of attuned to make sure that I was giving to all the different stakeholders in the organisation and outside so consistently for 18 months. And there's an element of, it's easy to forget that people aren't sitting next to me all day listening to me say the same thing to lots of different people. So, I did reflect, and we did reflect as a leadership team about, are we talking to staff enough about our values? Is this becoming too systematic? Is it, too much, how are we going to move these students from an A to an A star or whatever? Are we talking enough about values? And it's interesting because my team was giving me feedback about, we need you to talk about the local area more, or and remind people. And so that's been a learning point for me over the last couple of years. And the other thing that's interesting, that's obviously the challenge that everybody's been dealing with recently, is I feel that I've had a reasonable sense. I've now developed a reasonable sense of, for example, how Tottenham as a football club might might be able to support in particular way. There might be particular things which they're attracted to. Right. There might be other things which Highgate are attracted to, or one of our other partner schools, because we've got 8 other independent partner schools, and being able to understand, therefore, how they might be able to support in a way which suits them and suits us. But issues such as the current pandemic obviously change the dynamic for many of them. And I think one thing I'm learning still is to be proactive with how you communicate with those organisations, to make sure that you understand how something like that affects the way they look at their support for us. Because unless I understand that, actually juggling those balls becomes much more difficult. And I've had, there have been some circumstances which I've reflected on and thought we could deal with that in a slightly different way. Because for us, Tottenham or Highgate or Harrow or one of our other partner schools are kind of static organisations, but they're not, are they? They're dynamic in themselves, and being attuned to those dynamics is really important.
Yeah, because I obviously, given my age, I was at Highgate quite a long time ago, but I'm always interested how over the years, just when I thought it had changed radically, it suddenly changes again. And certainly it's a school that I probably wouldn't recognise now, other than some of the physical structures. And I mean that in a more sort of deep sense, in terms of what's being achieved and how it's being achieved and where the focus is, and the fact that it's co-ed, which it never was when I was there, or my father, or other relatives beforehand. In terms of sort of, and particularly with the pandemic at the moment, obviously there's minimal activity, or trying to support all your students at home. How difficult is that in terms of keeping them motivated, you and your team being motivated, trying to keep the team that you're working with aligned in what you're trying to achieve? What sort of a specific difficulties has it created, other than the fact that obviously you haven't got a school full of students at the moment?
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting one. So I think there's different challenges, obviously, with the students and staff. I think the biggest challenge that I've found with staff from kind of day one is you then walk into this building, to which I've still been coming, not all the time, but on occasion when I've had to, and it's empty, and you're, the kind of, in a school, your sort of break time, lunchtime, the time you walk around, the time you have a chat with someone in the staff room, the time you talk to students in the lunch queue, actually, they're really valuable. They inform, I think, my kind of view on where the school is to quite a significant extent. And I don't think I was necessarily conscious of that in the normal run of things. And then I think it's the challenge is making sure that we're taking the temperature of staff. We have the structures in place to make sure that we can look after our staff during what's a really difficult personal, time for individuals. And we have the structures in place to make sure they feel supported. But also that we're not kind of overplaying that. Is everybody okay? Let's have another survey about how everyone is feeling. Are we getting these things right? So I think we've felt as a leadership team a kind of a pressure to make sure that our response is thoughtful, that we've been clear about what we don't know and what we can't control, and occasionally done things wrong and turned around to staff and said that didn't really work the way we tried doing that. And being kind of very open in the way we've approached the issues which the pandemic creates on a kind of staff level, and I think that's been appreciated by staff. I mean, we've had some very good feedback around that. I'm sure there's lots of thoughts about what could have been done better, and there are lots of things that could have been done better. And I think the other interesting part is seeing what we might take forward in terms of ways of working. When some sort of normality, if that word exists, comes back to society, what might we take from this experience? Because there's lots of things I think we've learned as an institution which we will use. So I think there's being open to that, and kind of, because that also gives people, I think, a sense of a kind of sense of positivity around it, so that we're not always talking about this, the terrible pandemic that's changed everything and how we're going to cope, and we can do our best. That's not helpful at this point down the line. That's not a helpful dynamic, I don't think. I mean, with students, it's a slightly different situation. So, many of our students will very much struggle. So, for example, we've handed out 130 laptops, and we're only able to do that because of the resources we have from our partners and sponsors. There's a government scheme which gives computers to year 10 students, which has taken 2.5 months to come to fruition, and only gives a very limited number of computers to schools. So something central like that is inevitably going to take time, whereas we've been able just to immediately, as soon as we closed, literally drive around Tottenham handing out computers in a way that means that their education isn't disrupted. Now, there's not an awful lot we can do about the child who shares a room with a number of siblings, who has caring responsibilities. That is a challenge, and we have a number of students who have said, we can't be part of what's going on online because during the day I have to look after my younger sibling, for example. But we can, make my teachers aware, and I can do it in the evenings, or our students have an incredible resilience. Yeah. So I think that's one kind of area which has been challenging for many of our students. We now do have about 40 students on site whose home circumstances just make it very difficult for them to engage with the learning that's going on. My other worry, in a context such as ours, is we have, out of 160 year 13 students who are leaving us this year, we have, as I said, about 84% who have offers to leading universities, a couple who have offers to the US, 10 who have offers to Oxford or Cambridge. And a lot of that support, which helps them to achieve those, those destinations, happens around the school day. So it might be the kind of drop-in conversation with 3 or 4 of them with a history teacher at lunchtime. The book recommendation, the kind of conversation that is far more likely to happen in a middle-class home around the dinner table, or just at some point, which some disadvantaged students are really losing out on when they're not in this kind of environment.
Yeah.
Not because families aren't supportive of education, not because families don't want the best for their child, but just because they don't necessarily have the resource or the knowledge to support them. So the other group, that's the other group that it's a challenge for. It's creating the kind of softer opportunities, so whether it be lectures or whether it be just small group discussion, which actually help those students before they go to an interview at Oxford or an interview at Cambridge or an interview with an employer. And replicating that is a challenge in a kind of remote environment.
It's really interesting listening to you, the way you describe the situations that you face and that your students face and your teachers face. In that I've recently done some virtual sessions with clients who've said, look, we just want to bring our teams together and talk. We don't want anything planned. We don't want to do any further development in leadership, whatever it might be. We just want to bring people together and talk. And interestingly, one of the things that all of the people on the various sort of webinars I've done have said is they realize that being at home, or not working, as most of them are, not working in the offices, they're working at home, the interaction, not the formal stuff, not the meetings, not in your case the lessons, the study periods, the tutorials, but all of that social interaction in the corridor, having a cup of coffee in the staff room, or meeting colleagues before a meeting and just having that chat, has all gone. And actually, when they do then get on to things like this, but less conversation, but more to do with sort of planning or meetings, it's very much straight into, right, what have we got to do, who's doing it, what's happened, right, let's move on. And all that social interaction's gone. And I've noticed people feeling really isolated. They may be getting their work done. They're often much more committed because they realise that the situation is serious and they want to help and they want to get on with things. But they're much more isolated in the way they're going about things. And there have been some really interesting examples of people who are saying, well, no, I haven't picked up the phone or sent an email or text message to someone. I've just been so overwhelmed by what I'm trying to deal with that I've just forgotten about it. I've stopped doing it, and perhaps I should do it. Difficult times for all of us. So some of your students that will be leaving you in the summer, what in terms of sort of one or two things that you've learned in life about leadership, what sort of advice would you give them, regardless of whether they're going to university or not, but most of them obviously are going to university? What would be a couple of pieces of advice that you would give them to help them certainly through the early stages of either their academic career or their career, based on what you've learned?
I think so. Just to say, so I went to an independent school, but I was there on a scholarship and an assisted place, which was a scheme at the time which essentially paid for the majority of the fees. And I don't think that I particularly felt like I fitted all that well. I think I had a fantastic experience, but I think what I didn't find really is my kind of authentic voice, really. I think that's developed as I've got older, and I think this role and this institution has helped me to shape that. It's almost come the wrong way around. There was an opportunity for the role here. I took on that role, and as soon as I took on that role, I realised that this was me. This suited me just perfectly. This is aligned with everything I believe. I don't think if you'd asked me 2 years before what I believed, I would have been able to articulate it as clearly, or I wouldn't have understood it as well myself.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit of maybe a cliche, but it's interesting how many speakers we have that come into this school that say something along the same lines, who have been really successful in an area. There's two themes that normally come through. One is I didn't really know what I wanted and I kind of stumbled around a little bit. And this is really senior, impressive people. That's quite often the message. I did something at university and then my career is completely different. And then, halfway through my career, I completely changed it. And I don't have any of that stuff. I'm very much education. It's been education all the way. But what they do also say, which I really understand and empathise with, is that finding your, who are you? What do you stand for? And I think that would be maybe that's an age thing. Maybe people come across that at an earlier stage than I did. But I think that finding that is the key, because it makes you happier, because you can ensure that you're doing something which you do your best to make sure you're doing something which aligns with it. It makes you probably more successful because you can do it better. So yeah, I think that would be my key bit of advice, is find what drives you, find who you are as a person, and try and then do something which fits along those lines. And I'm not an entrepreneurial person at all, but probably the answer to them is, and if you can't find something, start something.
Yes, and see where it takes you. Yeah, and it's been great talking to you. I know we've talked before, and I said that once the school is back to whatever new normal is new normal, we're going to get together and come down and run some fun leadership stuff with you and your students. I'm looking forward to that day. When it's going to be, I'm not quite sure.
Who knows?
But thank you so much for joining us. It's been great. Thank you very much. Cheers, man. Bye.
Bye-bye.